In this lesson titled Other Groups and Pivot Tables, we're in Workbook Lesson 14, Pivot Tables and Charts, and we're on Worksheet tab, Other Groups. In an earlier lesson, we talked about how we can group dates to make the information more useful to you. You can actually create any kind of custom group as well, and that's what we're going to talk about here. Here we have a pivot table. Can click in it here, and you can see we have our pivot table fields, and then we also have our map of how the pivot table information is currently displayed over here on the right. So this pivot table information, we're just getting it from this first tab here where we have all of this information in a table, and all I did was use insert pivot table. It asked me where I want it, and I clicked on other groups and a location where to start it and said OK. So this is the beginning of our pivot table here, and we just had to check a few boxes. I'm going to uncheck them. You can see this is how the pivot table starts, and then we just decide on some things that we want in our pivot table, typically called fields. So I could say I wanted region, and I wanted number of items, and I also want product. And so it puts all those fields in there for us. And then it's up to us to just simply arrange them over here as we've talked about in earlier lessons. Let's see what it looks like with the product over here in columns. No, I think maybe products in row and our region in columns. There we go. So this is a very compact pivot table, showing us information from almost 500 rows of data, but we're seeing it here in just about 10 rows, so it's very compact. But we're actually going to make it even more compact by creating our own groups. So we can see here, because I checked region, I'm getting this region category that we had: Northeast, Southeast, Northwest, and Southwest. Well, what if we decided we wanted to see how the North was doing altogether? So I have Northeast and Northwest. Let me show you one strategy for doing that. Just to make things a little simpler, I think the first thing we should do is put those two next to each other. So I selected Northwest right here, and then I'm going to zoom in to just make this more clear. And we will scroll up. So with Northwest selected, I can grab the border of that selection, and my cursor changes to a four-way arrow. I click on that border, and I can drag it over here and change its location. Typically, if you wanted to move an entire column, you would select all of the column, and then you would select that border and move it. But because this is a pivot table, all I had to do was just select the header here and get one of its borders, and then I could click and drag. So now that these two are together, this will go a little easier. So I'm going to click on one and drag over, so both of these are now selected, and I'm just going to right click and choose group. So it gets a little complicated when you first click on a group. We have to look and see what it did here. So it created this group called Group 1, and under Group 1 is now Northeast and Northwest. So we can rename this group. All you have to do is just click in it, and you can just type. I'm going to type North and hit enter to accept. And then if I collapse this, you can see I just have North with the totals for North. But when I expand it by clicking this little plus symbol here, then it's going to show me the numbers for both of them and then the total for both of these together. And let me just collapse that again. See, here we have just only the totals of North, and I open that up, and then it has to show Northeast and Northwest and then the totals. And so the same kind of thing is happening over here, but because these really aren't in their own groups yet, I just have Southeast and Southeast total, Southwest, Southwest total, kind of like that. You can even get rid of those. So you just have to be aware of really what's happening here. Let's do some other groups. I'm going to go ahead and collapse these so they don't show those totals, because they're really identical, aren't they? And we're going to now group these together, and what they have in common is South. So I'm going to click and drag over both of those, right click and choose group. And then I will just click on here first and hit enter to accept. And then I can collapse this and collapse north. And so we have the north totals, the south totals, and our grand total. So we do have some little extra things that maybe look like they're getting in the way a bit. One is that it's showing this region 2 and region up above here. But they're actually part of the hierarchy, and there's really nothing we can do. I mean, we could rename them. We could call that north and call that south as well if you want, just by clicking and typing. Also over here it came up with an overall title. Because we're dealing with the number of items, it's listing the overall title of our pivot table. Number of items, but we might want this to say maybe numbers by region, and I'll enter to accept. And product looks right here, and then we have our grand totals. We can also format. I could select all of these, go to my home tab and choose bold if we wanted those bolded so that they would be bolded like these other grand totals are. And maybe this is just too wide here. Maybe we want to stack this title. If I double click to edit, I can use my Alt Enter to force a return right here. So it says numbers by region. But now that I look at it, it's just too close to also the title product. So I'm going to hit backspace to bring that back up there. So there's an example of how we can create our own groups. And then we have the tools to ungroup them and to group them back again.